Okay. Oh, wrong book. I decided I'm going to read out of Fifth Sacred Thing. We're on the second chapter. I don't know if anybody's watching this or not, but I like to read out loud. I used to read out loud to Bodhi, and I read chapter books with Opal. I've had a couple boyfriends I've read to, and it's something I enjoy. So, if anyone ever does listen, I hope you're enjoying it. This is one of my favorite books of all time. So the first chapter has already been posted. So if you're jumping on for the second chapter, that's okay. But if you want to know what happened, you're going to have to listen to the first chapter. Okay, chapter 2. When Bird awoke, there was a boy in the bed with him. They cuddled together with the ease of long-time lovers. Bird's knees curved into the back of the boy's knees. His arms were clasped across the boy's smooth chest. And his cock nestled limp and damp between the boy's buttocks. Tom, he thought sleepily, curled deeper into the sweetness of the dream. Her eyes met his. No. Tom, he thought sleepily. I missed something. Sedino. He had been dreaming about Madrone, and for one moment he curled deeper into the sweetness of the dream. Her eyes met his. She forgave. What? He couldn't quite remember. And in trying to track the memory, he came up from the sleep to an awareness of the stink of piss and metal. He opened his eyes to find his lips pressed against the nape of a neck he did not recognize. The room was dark, but slowly it began to lighten, as if somewhere an unseen sun were rising. He heard a creak above him. He was in a metal bunk with somebody, asleep on the tier above. A plastic mattress bulged down against metal springs. Now he could see tier upon tier of bunks. It was a big room, big enough to hold maybe 60 bunks, with metal tables down the center. The light came from a grid of bars that blocked the window. He didn't know where he was or how he'd gotten there. The boy stirred in his arms. "Charlie," he murmured. "You awake?" "Charlie? Your name is Charlie." The boy's voice was patient, as if he'd explained this many times before. I don't think so. Don't worry about it. You just don't remember." He was pretty sure his name wasn't Charlie, but for a long moment he couldn't remember what it was, and it scared him. Then it came back to him. Bird. It sounded right. It fit him. But he didn't say it out loud because he had been raised to know that names had power. "Who are you?" he asked the boy. "I'm Little John. I'm your girl." He was sure the boy wasn't a girl because he could feel his cock when he ran his hand down the smooth body, and the cock was beginning to stiffen, as was his own, as if his body remembered something his mind did not. He felt sick, confused. "It's okay," Little John said. "You don't remember so good. The big sticks did something to your mind, but it's cool." "I don't remember anything." "I know, don't worry about it. Fuck me. I don't know you." The boy smiled. "Charlie, you've been fucking me every day for the last year. You just don't remember." "For a year? What year is this?" "The 48th year of the new millennium." 40th? "No, 48th. That's 10 years from now." "No, Charlie, that is now." "That can't be true." "Want me to flip on the vid news and prove it to you? All I need's a screen." "I've lost 10 years? Why not? If you can lose one, why not two? Two, why not five? Five, why not 10? Believe me, one thing we got plenty around here is time. You could lose 20, not barely notice them." "Shit. Fuck shit, Little John said. Or better yet, let's just fuck. But Bird had rolled over on his back. He felt a sense of vertigo, as if everything around him were spinning and tumbling. Where are we? Terminal Island, Angel City, heart of the Southlands. They call this the pit. Bird had one moment of sheer panic again. He had been fucking a stranger, a boy who could have anything in the way of a disease, even the old immune disorders or the archaic blood cancers. He felt his body and the boy's. They seemed clean, and going into his body seemed to ground him a bit. The dizziness subsided, and a few memories swam into focus. I remember a prison doctor coming at me with a needle, he said. You remember that? Hey, you never remembered nothing like that before. The boy rolled over to look at him. Little John had close-cropped, straight brown hair, a dark face with delicately molded bones and bright blue eyes. The effect was startling. Maybe your mind can come back. Don't I remember anything? You remember for about 5 minutes, then I have to tell you all over again who you are and who I am. The vertigo was back, and the sick feeling in the pit of his stomach. What if it all went away again in 5 minutes? What if he had lost his mind and could never find it again? That must be hard for you, Bird said. I don't mind. There's worse things. Anyway, you always remember how to fuck. Sometimes when you fuck me once, you forget that you already done it, and so you do it again. And you always remember how to fight. Around here, that's all you really need to know. How did you get here? Got caught stealing water one too many times. Hell, I practically grew up in here. My whole family was witches. They got rounded up in 43, and I landed out on the streets, right? What do you mean, stealing water? You know, water. Bird was silent. There was something here he clearly didn't understand, something so obvious to Little John that he couldn't seem to explain it. Was it one of the things Bird had forgotten? How could he know what he didn't know? He let the matter drop for now. How old are you? Bird asked. 19. The boy seemed younger than that. 14, 15 maybe. Bird was 19 himself, or he had once been. But it was 10 years ago. Where had he been? He wanted to grab hold of something quick before he sank into an endless well of lost years, spinning his mind like a wheel, trying to remember, not being able to remember. Are 5 minutes up yet? He wanted to ask. Am I still here? Am I still me? Something else was bothering him. It was like a faint voice in the back of his head, calling. When he followed it, he dropped into a well of pain. Sweat broke out on his forehead. You okay? Little John asked. I don't know. He was caught somewhere between memory, reality, and something else. He couldn't tell who the pain he felt belonged to. Can you ground me? What do you mean? Speaking was becoming a greater and greater effort. I thought you were a witch. Yeah, but I don't know any magic. My folks all died before they could teach me anything. Bird was trying to ground himself, trying to make contact with the earth. But he seemed miles away, imprisoned under concrete and steel. He bit his own lip hard, trying to breathe, trying to remember an image or a word that could anchor him. Grab my hands, he whispered. Little John obeyed. The pressure on his hands was solid, was real. He could feel his hands and know they were his own. And from that knowledge follow a trail of sensation slowly up through the body, his own dull pain of old injuries, which was different. He now knew from the pain he heard inside of him rather than felt. Someone was in pain. Someone was calling for help. Thanks. Bird withdrew his hands. Somebody's hurt, but it's not me. Maybe it's the new guy they brought in yesterday, Little John said. They beat him pretty bad. Where is he? The last bunk over by the door. Bird shifted his weight and sat up. The bed creaked. Be careful, Little John whispered. Bird nodded and got up slowly. His body felt odd, both uncomfortable and familiar. He moved slowly for the sake of silence, and because there seemed to be a time lag between each impulse of the brain and each movement of his muscle. At last he reached to the bunk nearest the door. A still figure lay there, and Bird could feel pain radiate out from him. He knelt down and placed a hand on the man's abdomen. The breathing the breathing was shallow and the life force waning quickly. He was dying. Bird took a deep breath. He wished for Madrone or Sandy or somebody else who was talented at healing. Then his mind clutched at the names in a sudden attack of panic. Who was Madrone? Who was Sandy? He thought he remembered them as long as he didn't think too hard about them. But when he tried to focus on the memory, he was swimming in doubt. Was he remembering or inventing? How could he know for sure? Don't think he told himself. Let your hands do it. His mind still felt dull, cloudy, and he couldn't feel any power moving through him. The pain was a sound in his head. If he could make sound, maybe he could change it, but that wasn't possible. Could he change the sound in his mind? He thought he remembered an old chant. If we have courage, we can be healers. Like the sun, we shall rise. The note of rise reverberated in his mind, and he held it, strengthened it, imagined it passing through the broken body on the bed. The pain drained away, and the man's breath became slower, deeper, and more substantial. Bird's inner hearing grew keen. The broken ribs, the injured kidneys, were discovering sounds, a rupturing of the body's harmonics. But he could find a note to repair the worst of the damage. The man would live. Eyelids fluttered on the man's face, their movement barely visible in the dark. His eyes opened. Bird could not see their color, only the brightness and intensity that flashed out. His lips moved as if he were whispering. Bird leaned close. The earth is our mother, the man said. It was the beginning of a chant. Bird caught a sense of expectancy from the man, as if he waited for a reply. We must take care of her. Bird finished the line. A faint smile moved over the man's lips. Thanks, brother, he whispered, and then slept. Bird crept back to his bunk and lay down beside Little John. His head hurt. He wanted to sleep, but he was afraid to lose consciousness, afraid he might not find it again. What'd you do? Little John asked. He'll be okay, Bird whispered. Man, you better watch it. If they catch you witching somebody, they'll kill you. If you take my advice, I'd be cool if I was you. I mean, play like you're still crazy until you catch on to the scene, right? Comprendo. Shh, talk English. Calm, right. Got it, goddess. Do I have a headache? You've been under a powerful enchantment, maybe. Or maybe you've done it to yourself. Where are you from? He didn't know how to answer. Images flashed out at him. Faces, gardens, the gingerbread facade of a house with a peaked roof. His head wanted to split open, and he couldn't tell which of them was real. Far away, he said. That, at least, he was sure was true enough. Far, far away. A bell clanged harshly. Little John jumped out of bed, pulled on gray sweatpants and a sweatshirt, and handed a pile of the same clothes to Bird with an automatic gesture, as if it were something he were used to doing. Put these on, he said. Get up quick. It's count. Bird had just time to slip clothes on and lurch to his feet when the heavy metal door grated open. 5 big guards walked in and surveyed the scene. Everybody up for count, one bellowed. The room was filled with shuffling and grumbling, and 60 men struggled to their feet. The man in the bed by the door lay still semi-conscious. One of the guards jerked him roughly up to his feet and leaned him against the metal rail of the bunk as the guards walked around, counting once, counting twice, counting again. Line up for breakfast. Bird stood behind Little John and followed what he did. He looked for the man he had healed. In the light, he could see that the man was slightly built, skinny. The brown skin on his face crisscrossed with lines that made him appear somehow not old but wizened, dried up like an apple left too long in the sun. but Bird didn't dare stare too hard or try to catch his eye. The prisoners filed in line through a long gray concrete corridor to a dining hall, where they stood in line to receive trays of food delivered by disembodied hands from behind metal screens. They sat on benches and ate in silence. Bird found the routine strangely familiar, as if some part of him had done it 1,000 times, even though his mind did not remember. Or maybe it was just that he was surprised by nothing. Not the orders barked out to them, not the taste of glutinous starch that passed for breakfast. He was grateful for the enforced silence. It gave him time to observe the other prisoners and read the expectations in their minds. They didn't expect much of him, Bird discovered. When they got back to the barracks, someone handed him a broom, shoved him in another corridor, and locked the door. Automatically, he began to sweep. At the end of the hall was the guard station, a square-lighted room with heavy glass windows that allowed the guards to observe Bird and the doorway behind him. Windows on the other side of the station opened into the dorm, which was empty at the moment. All the men must be at their workstations. When Bird stood close to the window, he could see the 3 guards and hear their conversation faintly through the glass. "So, Harris, you gonna be down here for good now? Guess the dorm decided to clean house." "For better or worse, they thought you needed somebody with balls down here in the pit to shape you guys up." "Yeah, we could use a little shape down here. Unfortunately, yours ain't exactly it." "Not your type, Coleman? King Cole likes the pretty boys. Sorry, you don't qualify." "Who's the pretty boy in the hall?" "Him? He's the idiot. Don't mess with him. He's crazy. Anybody touches him, he'll bust your teeth out. Never seen anybody move like that before. They say he's a witch. That's why they done something to his mind. But you touch him or that scrawny girlfriend of his, you'll believe he's the devil himself." "Bust my teeth? I'll be busting his fucking balls." "It don't do any good. He don't remember it. He don't remember who he is or who you are. You bust his ass once and he don't remember it the next time. He's got no fear of you." "Then he's dangerous. Why the Jesus is he still alive?" "They want to keep him alive for some reason. I don't know. Maybe they think someday his mind will come back and they can find out something. Maybe they want to do some experiment on him. Maybe they forgot why they want to keep him alive. But you just stay out of his way and he don't cause no problems. He's sure as hell no instigator. There's others that are worse problems." "Like who?" "Like that new hill boy they brought in last night. Calls himself High John." "They all call themselves John. John something. Something John. It's one of their names for the devil," Coleman said. "What's his problem?" "His problem is our little problem. And that is, he's supposed to be dead. They worked him over good. Dropped him in on us like a lesson to our boys in case they've got any funny ideas. So why is he up and walking today? He's a tough little demon fucker, but we can fix that." The first guard shook his head. "He's a witch. Gotta be. It stands to reason." "You got witches on the brain, man. You want the guy dead? Seems to me we just work him over again tonight." "That's easy enough to say." Coleman pulled a smoke stick out of a pack of his breast pocket and tapped it on the desk. "Wait till you see the paperwork afterwards." They went on talking, but Bird decided it would be polite to move away for a while. He swept, stopped, and pondered, then swept again. So he had managed to fight well enough to stake out some small space around himself, even without quite knowing who he himself was. Tiosa. What had happened to him? He was even more disturbed by the conversation about the man he'd healed. There was too much he didn't understand. He felt like he'd come into the middle of a story where everybody else knew the background and the plot. He wasn't even too sure about who the main character was. One thing seemed clear. High John's life was in danger. He would have to warn him, although what good it might do he couldn't say. But he owed him that. It seemed clear to Bird now that High John's need had somehow called him back from wherever he was lost. He could have stayed lost for more years yet, maybe forever. The thought was cold in the pit of his stomach. His body, he noticed, felt aching and clumsy. but the pain was dull and he seemed to be used to it. His left leg and hip hurt, and if he leaned too long on them, the muscles in his thigh began to shake. His hands on the broom handle seemed stiff and clumsy, the fingers somehow misshapen, as if they'd been broken and not set right. That disturbed him in some way, almost more than anything else, as if it represented the loss of something so basic that he had to protect himself from the memory. It teased at the back of his mind, though, like liquid notes of music, like rippling melodies falling off the strings of his guitar. And then it hit him, with a force almost physical that left him sweating and clutching the broom handle for balance. He could remember his fingers where am I? Hit him. He could remember his fingers deft and fluid, not so much making music as matching what existed already and poured through him. His hands one with his instrument and the great singing voice inside of him. He stared down at his broken hands, aching as they curled around the thick broom handle. What happened to them? To him? In his mind were gardens, the smell of moist earth and roses, the muffled sounds of drums coming out of the basement in a tall painted house that felt like home. Lavender House. The name came to him. Down the street was Black Dragon House, where his grandmother lived, but he could not remember her name or picture her face. He could smell food cooking, onions and garlic and peppers. Hear voices and laughter floating down from the kitchen window. That was real. That was where he belonged. How had he come here, slipped through some crack in time and space to be trapped behind these walls and broken? Move that broom, boy. He hadn't noticed the guard coming toward him down the hall. It was the big guard, the new one, Harris. As he passed, he shoved Bird roughly out of his way. Move your godforsaken ass! Before Bird could react, he was gone. And that was fortunate, Bird thought, because he was suddenly filled with rage. He could easily have done something stupid. It struck him that if he wanted to die, opportunities abounded. But what he really wanted was to kick down these walls, smash the bars and the metal grates, breathe clear air again. He could feel rage flowing through him, itself a form of vitality, and the thought came to him that in spite of his pain and his losses, he was very much alive. He might survive to live a long, long time, trapped in these blank walls and barren corridors. His chest constricted, and he labored to keep on breathing. Where there is fear, there is power, he murmured to himself. He remembered the phrase from somewhere. He was going to have to get out of there. The long day passed. After a couple of hours, Bird was bored enough to wonder if he was truly going to go crazy. He was struggling to catch hold of pieces of himself that had once grabbed at finger holds or holds on a sheer rock face. That was a memory, a physical one, real as the swishing sound of the broom brushing the concrete floor. He could smell sun-warmed granite and hear voices shouting encouragement from below, could feel in his body visceral fear and then exhilaration as he pulled himself up over a steep ledge, but he couldn't quite place the moment in any context. He found that he could play with the edge of mindlessness, as if his memory were a balloon on a loose string that he could let run through his fingers and suddenly grab tight again. When he let go of memory, the moment became luminous. Even there, in the gray concrete, and the rhythmic action of his muscles and the soft sound of the broom on the floor were enough to keep him endlessly satisfied. When he brought memory back, he wanted to run away screaming. His grandmother had brown eyes that looked at you as if he could see you down to the bone. Maya. That was her name. Maya. He could almost hear her voice whispering to him, "You're a witch, boy. Use your magic." but he couldn't remember his magic. Probably by now his grandmother thought he were dead, if she thought about him at all. No, when she thought about him, if she were still alive. He were afraid to reach too far for her, afraid to send his spirit home until he was more firmly rooted back in his body. Another bell sounded, and he was marched back to the barracks for count. Then the men lined up and shuffled off to dinner. He could see High John moving slowly as if his body still hurt. Little John fell into line behind Bird, and they received their food and found places at a table. "Wait," Little John whispered when Bird prepared to eat. When all the men were seated, they folded their hands and bowed their heads as a voice came over the loudspeaker, intoning a prayer some part of Bird recognized. "We utterly repudiate the devil and all his works." It was the Millennialist Creed. Bird had memorized it once for a performance in school when he had played Justin Hardwick, the breakaway fundamentalist who, just after the turn of the century, had preached the doctrine of Christ's rejection. Why did he remember that when so much else eluded him? "In memory of Jesus Christ, who returned to earth only to repudiate the world for its sins, we abhor the earth, the devil's playground, and the flesh, Satan's instrument. We abhor the false prophets and the false gods, those who lie with promises of salvation, and those who tempt us to wallow in the worship of demons, whether they be called goddess, saints, Lucifer, or the so-called Virgin Mary, for we know that our Lord never lowered himself to take on lowly flesh, but was, is, and ever shall be pure spirit. Amen." I'm reading, Emily, a book.
Okay, can I watch TV?
Well, no, because I'm reading. Wait till the chapter's over, okay?
I'm going to do a whole lot of what my legs.
What? I can go downstairs and do it. Let me pause this. Okay, I had to pause it for a minute. Let me see, is it recording now? Yeah. Emily came down, so I paused it, but I'm going to take my book downstairs and read the rest of the chapters so Emily can have a little TV time. Look, there's Skylar. Skylar Freckles. Skylar Freckles. Skylar Freckles. Resting. Okay. Going down the dark stairwell. I did make my bed this morning, so that's good. Okay. Alright, we're downstairs now in my little gypsy wagon. Oh. Now, I don't remember where I left off, but I will find it. Let's see. When they were doing that prayer thing, right? That's what part we were on. In memory of Jesus Christ, who returned to earth only to repudiate the world for its sins, we abhor this earth. We abhor the earth, the devil's playground, and the flesh, Satan's instrument. We abhor false prophets and the false gods, those who lie with promises of salvation, and those who tempt us to wallow in the worship of demons, whether they be called goddess, saints, Lucifer, or the so-called Virgin Mary. For we know that our Lord never lowered himself to take on loathly flesh, but was, is, and ever shall be pure spirit. Amen. The words fell off his tongue as if he had been saying them for years, which he had he realized with a slight shiver. As kids, they'd all made fun of Hardwick's name. How hard is your wick? He could hear the laughs quite clearly, although he couldn't remember who had been laughing. But if he focused on what he did remember, even in the fragments, then more scraps of memory returned. Faces, a dark face like his own. Brown eyes always looking off into some distance, hands tapping rhythms on the edge of the table. Marley. If you boys can't keep still at the table, you can eat outside in the garden. With the dogs. His mother's voice crisp on the surface, but underneath Bird heard the harmonics of grief. Someone was dead. His father. It's not fair. Marley's making noise, not me. That was his own voice, and his mother's black eyes turned on him, and now her voice was sharp, but there was humor in it too. You're making noise now. It's a noise called whining. And then a girl's face popping in at the back door, her wild hair escaping from two black braids, her skin brown and gold and rosy in the warm evening light. Can Bird come out and play? Madrone, that was Madrone. He wanted to go outside now, to run and run and run, and to feel his numb feet pounding down on the dirt, putting distance between him and captivity, when he thought he might never get outside again. But he couldn't afford to think about that. Instead, he focused on cold, greasy noodles on his plate, forcing himself to chew and swallow, to stay focused in the here and the now. There was something he had to do. Hi, John. He had to warn him. The moment came, and they lined up after supper to carry their trays back to be stacked and washed. Skylar, come here now.
Skylar, go.
Oh, I thought she was down here. She's not? Penny, is she upstairs? She doesn't have to come down here.
What?
Is she downstairs or is she upstairs?
I don't know.
Well, why'd you say Skylar go?
I don't know.
Is she downstairs? Because if she's eating the cat food, I'm about to beat her ass. I hear noise. I'm gonna go look. Oh, it's Romeo. Never mind. It's Romeo eating his cat food like a good cat. Let's see. Let's see. The moment came as they lined up. And here we go. He wanted to go outside now, to run and run and run, to feel his numb feet pounding down on dirt, putting distance between him and captivity. When he thought he might never get outside again, but he couldn't afford to think about that. Instead, he focused on the cold, greasy noodles on his plate, forcing himself to chew and swallow and to stay focused in the here and the now. There was something he had to do. Hi, John. He had to warn him. The moment came as they lined up after supper to carry their trays back to be stacked and washed. Hi, John was in front of Bird, and when he set his tray down on the counter, Bird stumbled and dropped his own. The guard yelled at him, but Hi John bent down and helped him pick up the fragments of dishes. They're going to kill you tonight, Bird said softly without moving his lips. Yeah? What can we do? We. I wish I knew, Hi John said. I sure wish I knew. Thanks, brother. Their eyes met, just for a brief flash. "I'll try to stay with you," Bird whispered. High, John High John's eyes acknowledged the whisper, and he moved away in silence. Back in the cell block, the men kept an uneasy territorial truce. They were divided into distinct and separate groups. Bird found each group had its own tables, its own section of bunks. They called themselves blacks and Latins and Asians, whom the others called slants. The terms seemed only loosely related to color or culture. Nobody spoke any Spanish, and whenever a few unwary words escaped his own tongue, Little John silenced him. Some of the blacks looked white, nor the Asians, and some of the Latins looked black. Nevertheless, they identified each other clearly enough by hand signs. Bird guessed, or boldly, or body language, or subtle differences in the way they wore the common uniform, and the identification with one group or another determined everything where you slept. With whom you ate, whom you could count on, whom you had to watch out for. Bird was outside it all. No one needed an ally who couldn't remember who he was, or feared an enemy who might forget what he was doing in the middle of the battle. Little John took shelter in the aura of his protection and guarded him, making sure he remembered to eat, to dress, to stand for count, shepherding him away from the available dangers, keeping him out of the other's way. He was tended like something big, like some big, friendly, protective, potentially dangerous dog. High John walked over to the table where a group of men were playing cards with a homemade deck. He sat down. "Deal me in," he said. The men didn't bother to look at him. "Go hang out with your own kind," one of them muttered. "I am with my own kind. You ain't black." High John stood up. Suddenly the room was silent, everybody watching him. "All of us in here are the same kind," he said. It seemed to Bird that the temperature of the air dropped about 10 degrees. Nobody breathed. "I come from the hills," High John went on. He was breathing hard, and his wizened face seemed pressed into one wrinkled point with some inner effort he was making. "We learned the hard way. They set us against each other so that they can rule. We got to unite." He reminded Bird of an apple doll, and it seemed wrong somehow. He should look grander or more heroic. "You talk like that, they kill you, man," somebody muttered from across the room. "We're all gonna die," High John said. "Some of us quicker than others." "When have you ever had a chance to live? Are you alive in here? For how long? Until they throw your ass out onto some work levee and you fry in the toxins? What do you want, man?" Blah, blah, blah. But he never got a chance to answer because the door opened and the guards took him away. Bird lay on his bunk, staring blankly up at the wires that held the mattress above him. He could feel High John somewhere in pain. Bird wanted to help him, but all he could manage to do was drift into his mind, feeling the blows as they came, a helpless witness. It was night, and around him men slept. Outer ears could hear muffled cries and moans through the walls, or maybe he only imagined he could hear them. High John's pain weighed on him like a stone, while some memory of his own burgeoned up beneath him. Between the two of them he was crushed, could hardly breathe, yet he kept feeling that if he could only remember something he knew, he would be able to help this man, if only to help him die. Then he was falling into a dark place, a memory where he still floated unbounded out of context. He was alone in a dark cell, but he didn't remember how he had gotten there. He had no idea whether it was day or night. There was a thin blanket over him. but he felt cold. His right hand was shackled to something. He couldn't move it more than a foot or two, and his left leg felt heavy, encased in something that weighed him down. His whole body hurt more than he could believe. He wished for Madrone, wished she were there, bending over him, her face grave but confident, her healing hands pouring warmth on his wounds. But she was far away, and he was alone. He had never felt so alone. He had to piss, and he groped with his free hand in hopes of finding a bedpan, but there was nothing. If he got the bed wet, that would only make him colder. With a great deal of effort and some pain, he finally managed to shift his position to roll on the side and pee over the edge of the bed. Relieved, he began to feel thirsty and hollow inside. He couldn't remember eating or drinking or much of anything for a good long while, but he must be healing because his mind felt clear enough for him to begin to worry. What the fuck was going to happen to him now? After a long, long time, a door opened. He smelled soup. Stinking slime, a voice said, but hands placed a tray down near his feet, and he heard a metallic sound, like something being dragged to the side of the bed. Use the goddamn bucket, the voice said, and then the door slammed shut. If he ate, he was going to have to shit someday, but he would worry about that later. There was some sort of thin soup and bread and a hot, bitter liquid to drink, and the fact that it seemed as good as it did told him how hungry he was. Then he slept. In memory, he spent a long time in that cage, alone in the dark. He began to fly. He had always been good at spirit travel. Now he had infinite time to explore and few outside distractions. He went to his power place in the mountains. It was winter there, and in his astral body the crystalline structure of the snow became a labyrinth of rainbow chambers where he could wander for hours or days. Every crystal was a world. He could move through them into dark spaces. There were also, somehow, the great reaches of the emptiness between the stars. His captors had made time into an instrument of punishment, but he was free of it on his star roads, and they couldn't touch him. He was in the underworld, like a seed gestating in the dark. The scraps of old myths he half remembered became actual places where he dropped with Inanna down into the realm of the Queen of the Dead. The past was a place, too, where he rode with warriors of Queen Nzinga to defend their walled town, where he attacked cities and burned children in their houses, where he lay in dungeon like this one and was dragged out to burn, where he stood behind an inquisitor's mask and asked the question and ordered the torment, where if he lay in his hole long enough, he could experience every single thing that had ever happened to a human being. And there were beautiful places, orchards of fruit trees that shone with their light, misty islands where he followed the tantalizing back of a woman who was always just beyond reach. He moved in realms of color so pure that even sunlight could only diminish them. He heard music, chords so perfectly tuned he could dissolve in their perfection and lose all fear. If he could only hold the melody to himself and remember, he knew it wouldn't knit his bones. He knew it would knit his bones. And when he was far enough gone, so that even the edge of his mind disappeared, she came, the crone, the reaper, the one whose breath you feel in your hair when the gate slides shut and there's no going back anymore. The terrible beauty, the hag who holds out her withered arms and demands your embrace. In the fairy tales, it was always the older brothers who rejected her. But he was the younger brother, the one who laid out his cloak for her and lay down with her to let her take him into herself and take her in. And so he came to know in his body the power of the reaper and the song of the stars. Enough, Bird thought, struggling to shake free from his memories, to open his eyes. He didn't want to relive any more, but the images rolled on relentlessly. He remembered the shock when the guards came for him. Suddenly the cast was broken from his hips. He was shoved to his feet and forced to walk on legs that he didn't remember how. He was in a bare room facing bright light that stabbed his eyes, and there were men facing him whose malevolence was palpable in his own rotting flesh. "You ready to talk, boy?" they asked. He wasn't ready to talk to them. "What's your name?" It occurred to him that being Bird of Lavender, the Black Dragon, Good Witch of the North, was maybe not the safest identity around here. "Paco," he said. It was an old nickname, short for Pájaro, bird in Spanish. "Paco Negro." A fist slammed into his jaw. "Speak English, slime. None of that devil's tongue around here. What's your name?" Charlie Parker." "Charlie, we'd like to know how you got into that power plant. Who let you in?" He was silent. Who could he still betray? Who was alive? Who was dead? Spirit wings fanned the room. No, he wouldn't tell them anything. Claro, and there would be more pain, and then an end. "Boy, you cooperate with us, we'll cooperate with you. You can make it easy on yourself. You want a stonewall? That's all right. We can deal with that too." He stood silent. "Give me your hand, boy." One of the cops took his left hand, held it almost tenderly in his own. His face was round, and he had gray stubble over his cheeks. His eyes were bright blue, and he smiled a lot. The good cop, Bird thought. There's always a friendly one. "That's a nice hand," the cop said. "Delicate, refined." He touched his calluses, still there, though soft now, on the tip of Bird's fingers. The touch made his skin feel slimy, polluted, almost a girl's hand. "Musician." "Play guitar?" Control. Bird willed him not to respond. Not though a breath, or an eye blink, or a gesture. He knew how the game was played. If they could read a no to anything they asked, whether he answered it or not. "You a witch, boy?" asked the second cop, who had black hair and wore mirrored sunglasses that concealed his eyes. "Answer me!" he barked. Bird was silent. He was seeing Madrone's face asleep on her pillow, and the needlepoint over her bed that Johanna had done long ago. Who sees all beings in their own self, and their own self in all beings, loses all fear. In his own self he saw the executioner. He remembered a gun in his own hand, a face coming toward him, snarling, raging, then falling, blood spewing from the nostrils, like his father's face, dying by some other hand. Death moved on, the hands like scent, these, like his, passed it along. The men Bird faced were not alien to him, and so ultimately they could not defeat him. All they could do was kill him, and he wondered why they didn't get on with it. The first cop held Bird's hand down on the table in a steely grip.